Welcome back to week 2 of the head coach episode of Free Tendies Fantasy. 1 week in the books of the NFL season. It was a weird one, but we're here to help you through your start sit decisions for week 2. I'm here with Yanni. How's it going, man?
What's up, dude?
All right, let's just get right into it with the first game.
Okay, Bills at Dolphins, one of the higher totals for the week. Bills with an implied total of 23, Dolphins with an implied total of 25.5. Josh Allen actually hitting 9 different targets in the first game of the year. We expect that to concentrate, obviously, as the year goes on, but there's a little bit of ambiguity in the offense right now. You are still going to start your studs here. We have Allen, Kincaid, and Cook. Kincaid was elite in terms of route participation, and one would assume that if he keeps running routes on that number of Josh Allen dropbacks, eventually the passes are going to come. Don't panic yet. For now, we're going to call Coleman and Shakir tricky decisions. This is a high upside game. And if you're doing a DFS slate, you're throw a dart on either one, sure. Shakir outscored Coleman last week, but Coleman had better usage and a better snap share. We're waiting to see how that shakes out a little bit, but they're both tricky decisions this week, and they'll probably both do all right. It should be a high scoring game. For the Dolphins, you have your studs and Tua. Yes, he led the league in passing last year. He came back this year really strong. He's paid. The offense looks good. Tua is, in fact, if you drafted 2 quarterbacks, probably the one you want to be starting, unless you got like a Jaden Daniels or something. So Tua, Hill, Waddle, A Chain. It does look like it's going to play. It looks like he had a very mild ankle, possibly a high ankle sprain, but it looks like it's trending toward him playing this week. Should he sit out both Jeff Wilson Jr. and Wright? It seems like the sharps are kind of on Jeff Wilson Jr. I think Wright's a much better player. Both of them are all of a sudden on the flex radar for the week.
Yep, sounds good. My only comment on this one is I would expect the Dolphins to come out ready to play this week, assuming Tyreek doesn't get arrested again. Last week they came out of the gates and they just face planted and got it together in the second half. I think that second half is more indicative of what that offense is going to look like against a Bills team
Yeah.
who I think their defense isn't great. Yep. All right, next one. We got the Saints going into Jerry World to play the Cowboys. The Saints have an implied team total of 20, and the Cowboys have an implied team total of 26.5 points. For the Saints, our starts are Kamara and Olave, pretty simple. And our tricky decisions are Derek Carr and Rashid Shaheed. Then for the Cowboys, our starts are Dak and CD, your two guys, the Dak CD connection. We're sitting Zeke, and then tricky decisions are going to be Brandon Cooks, and then Jake Ferguson or Luke Schoonmaker, depending on if Ferguson plays. So a couple things here. At least as far as the Cowboys go, it's a pretty good defense, I would say. They're not. I'm not of the opinion they're at the elite level right now. I'm of the opinion Deshaun Watson just kind of fucking blows, and that's a big deal about why they looked so good last week. So I wouldn't worry about starting the studs in Kamara and Olave. Olave obviously didn't get home last week in a blowout, but that was a very weird game script. It was over by halftime. If you drafted Olave in like round 3, which is about where he was going, I wouldn't worry about that one too much. I have my concerns about Carr being able to sustain him specifically for touchdowns, but the yardage should be there. We've seen this before from them. And then Derek Carr, he looked great week 1. It's easy to look good against the Panthers, but I don't think this is as great of a defense, like I just said. And Carr looked good. I will tag him with tricky decision. He's probably looking more like a super flex type of start. I would be shocked if you're rolling him out in a 12-team league. And then Rashid Shaheed, he's got a little bit of the Robbie Anderson syndrome, where he's a deep threat. He could go for get a 70-yard touchdown catch at any time, like he did last week against the Panthers. For that reason, he's going to be a tricky decision. And quite frankly, now that Michael Thomas is gone, he's going to probably be getting more snaps and be more involved. Um, Only real important thing to note for the Cowboys, everything else is pretty self-explanatory. This running game is gross. If you drafted Rico Dowdle, I wouldn't freak out. The theory behind Rico Dowdle is that he is just kind of the best back there, and eventually he'll get the touches. So I wouldn't freak out about a week 1 dud. And then Brandon Cooks looks like he's a starter again in this league. He's starting in 2 wide receiver sets. There was some back and forth between whether or not it would be Tolbert or Cooks. Looks like it's going to be Cooks. And this Cowboys team, as it's currently constructed, hates to run the ball, loves to throw the ball. So Brandon Cooks maybe a little sneaky value later on in the season, and we're fine tagging him as a tricky decision against a pretty good defense here in the Saints. You have anything to add on to this one, Yanni?
No, I would say yeah. If Dowdle was dropped, I saw him dropped in a lot of my leagues. He's definitely worth a stash. Okay, the next game, and it's the one that I'm personally the most excited about. I have a bunch of fantasy guys on either side of this. Most of you do, obviously, and also just two really exciting teams, two kind of lesser known quarterbacks. We have the Buccaneers going to the Lions. Buccaneers with an implied team total of 22. Lions with an implied team total of 29 and a half. For the Buccaneers, indoor game, high scoring game. You're starting Baker. Baker's, I know a lot of people have him as a streamer. I think he should probably be rostered in two quarterback rosters. Like I think he's good enough that you should probably keep him up there. But in any case, this week you're starting him. You're starting Evans. You're starting Godwin. You're starting White. Cooper Kupp just destroyed them from the slot. Godwin's a really good guy to target in DFS. White looks like he's going to cede some of his work to Irving as the year goes on. He already did. It's pretty shocking to see him already doing that week one, and he was pretty inefficient. So you would expect to see that trend to continue. But should be a lot of passing in this game. They should be behind a pretty good amount, and he still does get the red zone work. He still does get the passing down work, and as long as that's going on, he should be treated like a mid-range RB2. And then your tricky decisions, Irving. I don't mind the dart throw on Irving this week. Probably not in 12-person leagues. Probably more of a DFS thing. Maybe a captain if you want to do a showdown captain slate on DraftKings. I would expect Irving to get some run this week. A little sneaky 8 or 10 carries maybe. And then for the Lions, everyone, get them out there. This offense is fantastic. Second highest implied total from Vegas on the year. Goff, Amon-Ra, Gibbs, Monty, Laporta, Williams, all of them showed they are startable weekly. I don't think there's really any surprise there, really any controversy there. Maybe people feel like Montgomery was a little bit discounted in the draft season. They're feeling good. Jamison Williams was probably discounted for what a quality prospect he was, but you're feeling good if you drafted either of them and you're starting all of them, especially in a game like this. This was the year to grab these Lions pieces. They play 13 of 16 games indoors during the fantasy season. This one's at home. Just awesome all around.
Yeah. My only things on this, Baker, I mean, if you had doubts about how he'd do without Canales, dude's all the way back. Stoked for him. Stoked. It's the perfect fit for him. I think we are starting to get into the conversation with Baker. Is he startable in like just a 12-team one quarterback league? I would still want to see more. I think the Redskins defense is pretty bad, and they took advantage of that last week. But keep your eyes
Yeah.
peeled. Baker could just be a starter here coming up. Amon-Ra, don't freak out about him. I know a lot of managers like, he gave you a dud week one. He's still a stud. I think that was just a weird that just sometimes the games aren't not everyone eats, right? There's a ton of weapons on the Lions. It makes sense that some of them might not get there every single week. Don't freak out about him. And then Gibbs and Monty. Monty's not going away. Monty's not going away. If you drafted Gibbs at the end of the first, early second round, don't freak out. The theory behind Gibbs is always that he's so electric with the ball. It's almost like back in the Saints days when you had prime Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara. They should both be startable. This is one of the few teams I say that have two running backs that are startable on a weekly basis. That's all I got though.
Gibbs actually took 60% of the red zone snaps, had the majority of the targets, and then took 75% of their snaps inside the 5-yard line.
Yeah.
So Montgomery did get that last touchdown to close it out. If you're taking 75% of their snaps inside the 5 and 60% of the red zone work and then almost all the passing down work, don't worry about Gibbs at all. You got yourself a stud, and probably a stud with a lower injury risk than most of the premium running backs in the league.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, 100%. I was encouraged by the usage Gibbs got in the red area, and at the end of the game, they just kind of used Monty as a battering ram against a tired Rams defense.
Yeah. And he did great. This was never a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Gibbs was never, barring injury, going to come out and get 70 or 80% of the snaps. That was never going to be what you got. You got him to be a premium A-chain. He was a premium version of.
Yep, MCDC will not change. He's shown us that. All right, next we got Deshaun Watson and the broken Cleveland Browns going into Jacksonville, Florida to play the Jaguars. For the Browns, our only start we have for you this week is Jerome Ford. We're going to tricky decision Amari Cooper, and we're sitting absolutely everyone else. And for the Jaguars, our starts are Travis Etienne and Brian Thomas Jr. Our tricky decisions are Christian Kirk and Gabe Davis, and our sits are Tank Bigsby and Trevor Lawrence. So the way I look at this game, right? Let's start on the Browns side. Deshaun Watson looks so fucking cooked. Like, I mean, we told you week one, we told you last year, until proven otherwise, until he can show us otherwise, Deshaun Watson's dead. I'm sorry if you drafted him on your fantasy team. It sucks for the Browns as an organization, but dude is absolutely cooked, and now he has another allegation coming out. I would not be surprised to see the Browns try and weasel their way out of that contract and void it, but we'll see. And Amari Cooper, he had a ton of air yards or prayer yards, as I like to call them, last week, so he's gonna get fed. He's the primary guy in this offense, but we have to tricky decision him because that's how broken Deshaun Watson is at this point. So yeah, the only thing I think the Browns can do consistently is probably run the ball. So that's why Ford is our only guy as a start. For the Jaguars, kind of a disappointing week one offensive performance against a defense that we kind of flagged as being probably worse than expected this year in the Dolphins. Travis
Yeah.
Etienne and Tank Bigsby. Etienne is a start and Bigsby is a sit for us, even though they split the work pretty evenly last week. This is kind of a flag plant for us that this is still very much Etienne's job. We wouldn't expect this to be like a Lions type of committed timeshare. I think that probably Etienne got doghoused a little bit because of his fumble on the goal line. Not entirely sure, but Etienne's a stud. You drafted him there. He's electric. He has an opportunity to take a 70-yard touchdown every time he touches the ball. I'd roll him out there. I'd feel comfortable about it, even though this is a good Browns defense. Brian Thomas Jr. Nobody really exploded last week for the Jaguars, but he got in the red area. He got home. I think he's lived up to the billing. And then Christian Kirk and Gabe Davis is our tricky decisions. If you listen to us week one, we told you that Christian Kirk is not starting in two wide receiver sets, and we didn't really understand the ADP on that. Guess what? He's not starting in two wide receiver sets. Well, I almost view him and Gabe Davis as even almost. Like Gabe Davis got home last week with a touchdown, didn't he? Yeah, Gabe Davis got a
No,
touchdown.
he didn't get the touchdown, but he played the most, he ran the most routes and took the highest snap percentage of them. No, he did not get the
There
touchdown.
you go.
That was Thomas.
My apologies. I was flying last week. Of course, I was on an airplane for opening week, so I had to like watch highlights. But yeah, I mean, until further notice, I would view Kirk and Gabe Davis as both tricky decisions. I think Thomas is the pass catcher you want to start here in Jacksonville, and Trevor. This is a tough matchup for him. I'm not out on the guy. Like we said week one, I think he's still developing personally. He has room to grow here. But this Browns defense, it's one of the only things that's not completely broken on their team. We still respect them. Vegas still respects them with the low point total. So yeah, that's pretty much all I got. You got anything to add on this one, Yanni?
Nope, you're right on. Okay, this game, one that's near and dear to our hearts, of course, we have the Niners at the Vikings. Vikings with a little bit of recent ownage over the 49ers when they go out there, so we'll see how they do this week. 49ers with an implied team total of 26 points, Vikings with an implied team total of 19 and a half. For the Niners, pretty straightforward. Purdy, most people that took him in that QB like 11 to 13 to 14 range. Depending on who you paired him with, maybe you have a better choice, but you almost certainly don't. Unless you have someone like Jared Goff or Tua there, you're going to start Purdy this week. Debo should have a monster game. He had, I think, 18 opportunities last week, something like that. He had the goal line rushing touchdown. And Ayuk is still rusty. Debo should go off. Kittle, you're starting every week, and then Mason CMC, however that shakes out, whoever's in, you're going to go ahead and roll him out. And then our sort of controversial call is Brandon Ayuk is a tricky decision, and that is more because he's rusty, not because of the player. I actually do think Brian Flores is an excellent defensive coordinator. I think the Vikings have played way above their skill level on defense ever since he got there. So I do think he also will have a really solid plan for him. That's part of it. But if Ayuk's healthy, not healthy, if he's full speed, full go, all that, he probably should have had like a 12-point game off the couch last week. So you are going to start him when he's back to full speed, which we would expect to be around week 3 or 4. This week, little tricky, depending on how you drafted. If you went wide receiver heavy, you might have better options. If I was looking at someone like Ramondre, I'm probably starting Ramondre over him. Like James Conner, if you took him late, I would start James Conner over him. Maybe even a little more controversial, Najee Harris at Denver. I would start Najee Harris at Denver over Ayuk this week. Just my personal feeling. For the Vikings, JJ and AJ. You're starting JJ and AJ. Sam Darnold's going to be a sit just because of the defense. I actually think Sam Darnold's a perfectly reasonable streamer, DFS, cheap DFS play if you want to make it. Addison looks like he's going to sit with his high ankle, so we didn't list him, but even if he's in there, you're absolutely not going to start him. This is his second high ankle in a month. He actually looked pretty good when he was in there too, by the way. So don't drop him or anything, but certainly do not start him off this second high ankle in a month against what might be the best secondary in football.
Yeah. I have a question for you, Yanni. If CMC is back, where would you put Mason? Because I think that personally that Mason's going to have value on this offense going forward, even if CMC is playing, just because they're going to try and not give CMC like the monster workload he's had to try and keep that Achilles healthy-ish.
So I actually was today while I was doing that crazy homework load I was telling you about. I actually had a podcast on from an orthopedist and from a physician about specifically what Achilles tendonitis means. It's pretty interesting. So it gives you only about 4 to 10% of them lead to Achilles ruptures, which is not what I thought. I thought, remember with Dre Greenlaw when he just kept popping up with an Achilles and then it finally went. I sort of thought that's what it was. It's only about a 4 to 10% of them end in a rupture, but the biggest thing with them is they are a direct result of too much workload. So this physician that was an expert in lower leg injuries was saying it is their coaching staff has to understand if they want him for the life of this 3-year contract, his workload needs to be like 2/3 of what it's been. So I'm talking like he should only get 200 to 250 touches this year if they are going to follow a workload managed plan. So if that's the case and Mason's getting like 12 touches, 10 to 12 touches in their offense, and like they don't want CMC doing the big scrum plays, right? He'll be flexible. If people were taking guys like Jalen Warren or Tajay Spears, he goes way above them. He'll probably push into that, like, he's not going to get into the tier of Pollard or Ramondre or James Conner or anything. But he certainly will be like a top 36 flex play. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that he'll.
So here's another question for you. Do you think we see a workload CMC this year, like a workhorse CMC? Because my personal opinion is no. I don't think there's any way we see a 22 to 25 touch CMC this year.
Yeah, I think that ship has sailed at least for the regular season, which by all accounts is the fantasy season. Yeah, I would expect if they're gonna give CMC that type of like bell cow workload he's had the past 2 years, it would be during the playoffs. So, the good news about CMC if you drafted him at 1 overall is he doesn't need that many touches to get home, right? Because he's such a good player. So, and I guess the only other note I had on this game is Brian Flores blitzes more than any other defensive coordinator in football. The key to beating this Vikings team is just beating the blitz, right? As long as you can beat the blitz, like you can beat the Vikings. And I think that we're going to see a different game this week. Last year, when the Vikings had the surprising upset over the Niners on Monday Night Football, Purdy was potentially concussed, and he was missing his left tackle in Trent Williams and Debo as well. He's got all of his weapons except for Biez a little bit rusty in this one. I would expect this to be a drubbing over a team that I don't think their defense is nearly as good as the Jets. I could be proven wrong here. The Vikings could come out and play at least well and stay in the game, but I wouldn't be shocked to see a blowout here. Niners looked great last week. I'm so excited.
Yep.
All right, next we got the Chargers going into Carolina to play the Panthers. My champions, the Panthers. For the Chargers this week, we are starting Justin Herbert, J.K. Dobbins, and Ladd McConkey. And our tricky decisions are Jordan Palmer and Gus Edwards. And unfortunately for my preseason darlings, the Panthers, this is a free Tendies first. It is just a big fat nope. No, thank you. No, thank you. I guess we'll start there. So for those of us who were excited about the Panthers, I know the Action Network gambling YouTube channel was just singing the praises of Dave Canales and the Panthers. All off season, they were on them in every single major bet last week. All of the trends, everything looked towards this being a better Panthers team And they showed us week 1. No, we still suck. And not only do they still suck, they have no talent really anywhere. There are a couple of pieces that I like. Like I think I think Deontay Johnson. A lot of people kind of have moved off of him. I still think he's a good wide receiver. Um, yeah, that's really the only player I like on the Panthers right now, and I think the narrative has shifted from this team. It is no longer a sneaky wild card team. Hey, these guys could be competitive. I think this is now a 16-game tryout for Bryce Young to see if he's going to be the quarterback next year. So
Yep.
if Dave Canales can't fix him, nobody can. And until we see any sort of improvement from Bryce whatsoever, you're going to be seeing that big, fat, bold nope under them every week until further notice. Then the
Yep.
Chargers. This was an interesting one. This was one of the teams I had the hardest time reading in the offseason just because of all the changes to the team, all of the turnover, all of the things surrounding them. But I think we got a lot of clarity last week against the Raiders in terms of what this team is going to be and what who the guys are, who the primary guys are. So this is as everyone kind of expected with Greg Roman and John Harbaugh coming in. This is going to be a running team. They're going to want to run the ball down your throat as much as they can. And surprisingly, J.K. Dobbins, he looks good coming off in a I think it was an ACL or Achilles. I forgot what it was, but it was a major injury last year. I was avoiding him everywhere, but if you drafted him in the eighth, ninth, 10th round, is like a bench stash. Congratulations, you got a running back one in a run first offense with Greg Roman. That's going to be one of I think the best picks of the offseason if you got him. I would love having him. And Lad McConkey looks like he's operating as the wide receiver one. There's a lot of reason to be excited about him. I know I'm not a big college football guy, so I didn't really know much about him coming out, but he looked good enough to me in terms of what his role is going to be in this offense. I actually have one league where I have Lad. I'm starting him this week in the flex. I would feel good about it. This is about as plus of a matchup as you can get, and I'm not sure you could show me a spread that is high enough in the Chargers' favor to not make me think that they'll probably cover, if not more. I saw your head shaking there for part of what I was saying. You got any feedback on this one, Yanni?
Yeah, man. We didn't get to do our free agent episode this week. I have midterms. Old Ted got a promotion at work, man, so we're really busy. But the Dobbins thing, again, we get in disagreements. We fight like siblings about this shit. I take the injuries thing really seriously. The Achilles expert that I was listening to on Dobbins said he should have 2 to 4 explosive weeks, and then he should start to get fatigued in his leg. He should lose his burst. He should lose his ability to cut in about 2 to 4 weeks. Do you remember when Cam Akers looked really good off his Achilles for a little bit? It
Yeah.
is worth noting that still, to this date, no running back has ever really come back from an Achilles. So, yes, J.K. Dobbins is great for now. Enjoy him for now. I would be selling him immediately. I don't think he's going to be one of the best picks in the draft. And I think in about a month, people are going to be going, oh my God, I could have gotten a real player for him. Just my opinion. I would trade J.K. Dobbins for Najee Harris straight up.
Interesting. Okay, because I watch one of the few games I watched last week was the Raiders at the Chargers. I was amazed by how good J.K. Dobbins looked. I was kicking myself that he was right there in almost every single draft I had, and I just passed over him. I was like, no, he's too injured. I'm not taking him. This guy probably is not going to be a good fantasy pick. But
Give it a month, you'll feel way better.
all right, well, I mean, for my sake, I hope you're
Every
right.
year we do this, dude, he's led the NFL in yards per carry since he came in the NFL. Nobody's ever said that J.K. Dobbins isn't fantastic at 100% at the start of the year. That's never been the question. It's always the longevity and sustainability. Okay. Raiders at the Ravens in what should be one of the worst games of the week. My personal opinion is that the Ravens are a top 5 team. They just ran into the #1 team in the NFL last week. We have the Raiders with an implied team total of 16.5 at the Ravens, implied team total of 25. For the Raiders, I mean, you have your 2 studs. Unless you drafted a really good roster, you probably don't have a better start than Devontae this week. So we are going to start Devontae and Bowers. Positive game script. Bowers looks like he's going to be like a top 8. Talk about it, maybe top 6. You talk about like a league-winning pick that you made late in your draft. Bowers certainly looked like it, especially in full PPR. And again, Adams, I think he'll have a down game by Adams standards. That still means he's a start. I have one league where I'm probably starting Ramondre over him, but that's just because Ramondre looked so good, and I do have the flexibility to do that with that roster. And then your sit is going to be White, and we'll get into that in a second. And your tricky decision is going to be Myers. Myers saw enough volume, and then the Ravens have the really savage secondary. I think Myers will find some room this weekend there. White, he already is ceding third down work to Madison. The coaching staff already came out and gushed about Madison after the game. Madison had his career-long receiving touchdown this week. And it looked like this is a coaching staff that's willing to do a just two-down workload for White, third down workload for Madison. And when they're trailing, Madison's going to eat into that first two-down workload. So at this point with White, right, he's kind of looking like the classic dead zone running back. You got him projecting this workload. You got him off of that 4-game production streak he had at the end of last season. I actually won a championship with him starting in my roster last year. And I actually went to 2 championships with him starting in my roster last year. And I understand the excitement about him going into the draft. I did not personally take any share. But so far, Madison has decisively outproduced him, and I would actually expect him to keep eating into his role until he's getting enough of the receiving work and they're trailing enough that Madison's actually the back to own in Oakland. But we'll see. For now, White's a sit. Very tough rushing defense. They gave Pacheco hell last week. Ravens, pretty straightforward. You're starting the QB one. You're starting Flowers. You're starting Henry. A little bit of controversy this week between the Andrews and Likely thing. I do think Likely, because their receiving core is so bad, is just going to be one of those guys that you're probably starting as a top 12 tight end for the rest of the year. I think that takes Andrews' upside as a top 3 tight end off the board, but that does not mean he's not a top 4 to 8 tight end with tight end 1 overall weekly upside, just not season long upside. Andrews, I kind of got it wrong when I went back and looked. He has never had more than 3 catches and 30 yards against a Steve Spagnuolo coach defense. Apparently that's like the thing he does, is destroy tight ends when they play. He double teamed him a lot. Andrews actually had the most separation on the Ravens last week. He was getting double teamed, and Lamar was not looking his way. I actually am totally fine with Andrews season long. I think he's going to be just fine. But I do think it's going to be like a Gronk, Aaron Hernandez thing. I think you're going to start them both for the most part. And I think you're going to be perfectly happy with both. I also think you're going to feel stupid if you spent 25 to 50% of your fab on Likely. That was wild. In one of my leagues, a guy spent 100%. But rolling him sure. 100%.
I mean, to me, this was the year of the tight end zero. After week 1, like all of your top tier tight ends really kind of had down weeks. So I think if you were a tight end zero team this year, you're probably like, you might have had Brock Bowers near the bottom of the draft, right? Like I think that probably worked out better for fantasy managers. And to me, week 1, it's not like you said, it's not a story of Mark Andrews sucking. I think what it is just Isaiah Likely is a great player, right? I think that he's just a fantastic player who is going to have a role in this offense. So if you were a tight end zero team, I don't hate 25% of your fab. If you drop 100% of your fab on Likely, though, okay, I don't agree with that decision, but made sure you got your guy, right? That's pretty much all I have. I guess I might be betting the Raiders this week, dude. I can't quit him. I think Gardner looked fine last week. I'm just still planting my flag on Gardner Minshew. I think he looked fine, is the word I would describe it. Not great, not bad, fine, kind of where I expected. And I think that if you're a Devontae Adams owner, I wouldn't panic too much. This is a tough matchup this week. We were kind of going back and forth before we started recording whether or not he should be a start or tricky decision. I think with where he was drafted, right, you probably have to start him unless you have like Jameson Williams on your bench, for example. Then I could see an argument for sitting Adams, but I think he's going to come around. I think that Gardner Minshew will be able to sustain weapons on this offense. Brock Bowers was decent last week. I think Brock Bowers will continue to eat, and I think that the way this Raiders offense breaks out will be pretty condensed and fantasy friendly for their studs going forward. But this week, tough one. All right, next we got the Seahawks going into New England to play the Patriots. The surprising 1-0 Patriots for that fact. Shout out to Gerard Mayo, undefeated as a head coach. Good shit, dude. Biggest underdogs of the week came out and beat the brakes off Joe Burrow and the Bengals. That was fun to see. As a Patriots hater last year, tip my cap to you guys. That was an excellent performance.
Yeah.
But this will be a tough test this week with the Seahawks. For the Seahawks, our only start of the week is Kenneth Walker. Our tricky decisions are Gino, DK Metcalf, and Tyler Lockett, and our sit is JSN. And for the Patriots, this is going to be the easiest team I think in the world to do this slide for going forward. We're starting Ramondre, and we're sitting everyone else until further notice. So we'll start with the Seahawks here. Um, it looks like the talk this offseason about Kenneth Walker being featured, that appears to be legitimate based on what the usage was last week. I think if you are a Charbonnet bag holder, I still like the kid. I think he's very talented, but until there's an injury to Kenneth Walker, I don't see him. I see this coaching staff being too in on him. JSN, he's kind of a guy that a lot of people were looking at to emerge this week or I guess this season as being like, a flexible, potentially wide receiver 2 type of guy. Did not get home last week. Gino looked off to me. We actually recommended maybe JSN as a sneaky start over Lockett. Lockett ended up being the guy you wanted there in week 1, but if you're a JSN bag holder, I wouldn't worry about it too much. I think that as long as Gino doesn't look terrible, he'll get there eventually. He's too good of a player, in my opinion, to keep this usage up. And then for the Patriots, yeah, it's easy. It's just Ramondre. If you have Jalen Polk, I would just wait and see. I would just wait and see if he emerges. I don't think this is going to be the matchup for anyone in the passing game with a Mike McDonald run defense. The Seahawks defense looks better to me. I don't know if it's because they played a rookie quarterback last week in Bo Nix and the Broncos, who don't have that much offensive talent, or if they're really figured it out. And I don't think we'll figure out this week either, because the Patriots just kind of are limited in what they're able to do. But yeah, that's what I got for this one. Yanni, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, Kenneth Walker was a did not participate today with his core injury he picked up. He went from limited to did not participate. So it's at least noteworthy. They said it was nothing serious. He was making jokes in the press conference after the game, kind of lighthearted. But he's had 2 core surgeries the last 2 years. So I saw Charbonnet on some waivers in some of my leagues. If he is on waivers, he absolutely should not be. Go get him. And you're certainly starting him if he's out.
Yeah, that's a smash start for me. I am
If
the
he's
Charbonnet guy. Like I loved Zach Charbonnet. I've even said I think he's better than Kenneth Walker straight up as a player. If Kenneth Walker ever goes down, I think that he will produce in a feature
yeah,
back role, 100%.
yeah. Okay, another one that actually would have been really good if Love was healthy. Colts at the Packers. Colts with an implied team total of 22. Packers at 19. For the Colts, kind of tricky, right? How we're adjudicating this weird wide receiver split. They averaged like over 60 plays a game last year, and I believe they had 44 last week. It was in the mid 40s. So what you're definitely going to do is you're going to start JT and you're going to start Richardson, especially after seeing what Saquon did to him last week. The controversial part is what you do with the wide receivers. For now, what we're going to say is you're going to start Pittman. A, where you drafted him does matter. B, he did get a good amount of targets last week. C, you would not expect Anthony Richardson to have many 9 completion weeks. Those bombs that he was hitting to Pierce kind of ended their drives quickly. I saw like people panicking about Jonathan Taylor too. Same thing. It was just a very weird week, man, all around. But that being said, your tricky decisions. Look, if you want to throw a DFS flyer on Pierce, I bet you he'll be like $4,000 this week on DraftKings. Mitchell will be like 3,000. Mitchell was literally 2 fingertips away on these 2 catches from having an opening debut of like 140 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also hit almost 21 miles an hour on the field this week. He hit the fastest on-field speed of any player this week in the NFL. Again, Mitchell's another one that I was seeing on some waivers. If he's on there, he really shouldn't be. I know people are concerned when Downs comes back. That's an Alec Pierce problem. That is not an AD Mitchell problem. They drafted AD Mitchell in the first round. He already looks fantastic out there to me. This week may be the first time we see it with Jair Alexander getting the Pittman treatment. But again, still going to have faith in Pittman until this thing shifts one way or another. For the Packers, with their quarterback situation, the only guy you are starting is Jacobs. He might even get a slight boost with the read option with Malik Willis. Maybe Your tricky decision is going to be Reed. He kind of goes from like a mid-range to high-end wide receiver two with wide receiver one upside to like a flex. Um, what you're really going to hope for with Reed is that they hit those reverse plays with him or a screen plays with him, and he does the Debo thing. And it's certainly possible. He seems to be a tremendously talented player. And then, Watson, I know this kills. There were a lot of Watson truthers this year. The Fantasy Pros guys were really big on him. I was really big on him. I took like 30 or 40% Watson shares in my rosters. And he saw five red zone targets the first week. You were feeling great right up until Jordan Love got hurt. You absolutely cannot start Watson without Love out there. If you can get him like for free thrown on a trade, do that, but do not roll him out there as a flex this week. You almost certainly have a better option on your roster.
Yeah, I
Anything,
agree. My two notes for this are I would expect, because last week was Anthony Richardson's fifth career start, right? Like this is basically still his rookie campaign. I would expect
Yep.
as he moves along that he's going to be not so erratic, right? Like right now,
Yep.
Anthony Richardson is the highest rolly possible fantasy player, and that's what makes these wide receiver projections a little bit hard. But yeah, I wouldn't panic if you're holding Colts wideouts. I think that as Richardson develops, it's going to be better for them. Anthony Richardson to me looks like an absolute smash. I cannot believe I was so down on him when he came out of college, but that guy, I don't. He does stuff that I don't think any other person in the league could do. Like just from a physical standpoint, he is so incredibly gifted. And then my other note for the Packers, I had a hard time. This is kind of like the Chargers to me, where coming into this season, I didn't really have a read on who the guy to own is in Green Bay. To me, Jaden Reed blew my doors off. He blew my socks off on Friday night. I think that he would be, if Love was in and Love actually plays well, Jaden Reed is going to be an absolute smash start. If he was going in like the sixth, seventh round, if you drafted him there and Jordan Love returns kind of soon and is okay, right? Like I would feel really good about Jaden Reed. To me, he's the clear cut wide receiver you want in Green Bay going forward. All right, next we got the Jets going into Tennessee to play the Titans. The Jets have an implied team total of 22 points, and the Titans have an implied team total of 18.5 points. For the Jets, our starts are the two first rounders, Brees Hall and Garrett Wilson. We're sitting Alan Lazard, and our tricky decision is Rodgers. And for the Titans, we're starting running back RB1 Tony Pollard. I called that this offseason. Pats on back for me. Our tricky decision is Calvin Ridley, and then we're sitting Spears and Hopkins. So we'll start with the Jets first. To me, even though they ran into a buzzsaw on Monday against the 49ers, I thought that the way Rodgers looked was encouraging. If you're a Jets fan, even though you started this season 0-1, I would be more optimistic about your team than probably I've been in a long time. I think you guys will be good this year. I think Rodgers is not dead yet. He looked, if you compare him to, say, someone like Kirk Cousins, who we'll get to in a little bit, Rodgers looked physically ready. He still has a rocket. I would feel good about him. We have him as a tricky decision this week, though, because I think the dynamic of this Tennessee Titans defense has changed. For last year, if you were a watcher of the show last year, one of our favorite things to tell you about the Tennessee Titans is they're an elite rush defense, and they could be passed all over. So we would always tell you, sit your running backs if possible against Tennessee and start all your pass catchers. But the Tennessee Titans defense, at least pass defense, is much improved. Much improved. Who's that corner they got from the Chiefs? I always forget his name.
L'Jarius Sneed,
Yep, you
who
bring
should
in
have
L'Jarius Sneed.
who should have the Garrett Wilson matchup this week.
Yep, but dude, to me, Garrett Wilson looked so good. Like even against the Niners, right? Like I mean, he didn't really get home for you on fantasy, but this dude is so talented. I would not be feeling bad with a end of the first round Garrett Wilson pick. And the other note for the Jets, we're sitting Lazard. He has his bromance with Rodgers. He got home against the 49ers last week, but I would just view that, and I think we're kind of planting our flag here as kind of a one-off. I wouldn't recommend him going forward. Who knows? If we see this continue, if we see the weird Lazard usage and Rodgers' bromance with him continue, Maybe he makes his way into a start or a tricky decision eventually, but for now we're calling it a one-off. For the Titans, I think they played a much improved Bears defense last week. I think they had a hard time. Will Levis, who I was pretty high on coming into the season, I know Yanni was pretty high on coming into the season. He didn't look great. The Titans coach even came out after the post game and said if we had punted every time on 1st and 10, we probably would have won that game. So not the start you want from them, but encouraging news. If you're a Tony Pollard drafter, congratulations, you got the clear RB1 to me and a run first offense. So that's a smash pick. And Tajay Spears, I wouldn't freak out about him if you drafted him. I would just kind of pivot the expectations there. Now I've used Tajay Spears as more of like a handcuff, and your like absolute best case scenario is like Jalen Warren type of usage where he might get some touches. He probably won't goose for you on weeks, but to me, Pollard's the clear guy to own. DeAndre Hopkins, he didn't look healthy at all last week to me. I think he's a sit until further notice, until he looks better. And then Ridley's getting the Sauce matchup, so tricky decision. I wouldn't freak out about him though. I think Levis will get better, and I think this Titans team, I still like him. I still like him as a frisky team. I think they'll be probably not playoffs, but I think they'll be better than advertised. I like Levis. I like the team, but tough matchup going against the Jets this week. You got anything else to add?
No, I mean Ridley dominated their usage so much. These are two bad matchups for him to start the season, and that's just the way it's going to be. I have a good amount of Ridley shares too this year. Um, just chill out, wait on him. Hopkins, man, he's playing with currently he has a torn MCL he's playing through. So, you know, in your 30s, massive usage over the years, torn MCL, low passing volume offense. Now they should be a higher passing volume offense in theory, but if Will Levis keeps playing like he is, they're not going to be. I don't know. I would be trying to move him for anything if you can get it.
Fair enough.
That's it. Okay, the New York Giants at the Redskins. This one will be interesting. I don't know, good interesting, but it'll be interesting. You have the Giants with an implied team total of 21.5, Redskins with an implied team total of 23. For the Giants, you have your concentrated offense, right? Neighbors and Singletary. You kind of know what you're getting with both of those guys. Singletary got, I think, 15 or 20 opportunities last week. Their offense was just so terrible, it didn't really matter. But, if they get in the goal line, presumably he's going to have that role. And Neighbors, actually, you basically saw the absolute worst case scenario for Neighbors. And it was like, 5 receptions, 60 yards or something, or 6 receptions, 60 yards. And that was in a game when Danny Dimes is getting destroyed. He's throwing multiple interceptions, and they didn't even score a touchdown. If his floor is like 10 or 11 points, great. We saw Marvin Harrison Jr.'s floor is nothing. So, look, not ideal start to Danny Dimes with the Giant season, but I think you actually feel very good as a Neighbors owner. I think he's someone you should be trying to trade for, too. Sort of tricky decisions. We're actually going to have Danny Dimes as a sort of tricky decision this week. The Skins passing defense is that bad. They are that terrible that I think he's basically free in DraftKings. I'm probably going to make a Danny Dimes roster this week, and I'm looking forward to it. And a sneaky stack I may go for in that is with Wan'Dale Robinson. I don't know if Wan'Dale's a particularly talented player. I actually have always kind of liked him. I had some Wan'Dale shares last year too, just keeping him on the IR, seeing if he would hit. He did see 12 targets in his first game back. They weren't high quality targets. They weren't high quality. I think he had 6 catches out of those 12 targets. But 12 targets is elite wide receiver usage. Like it or not, he probably should be rostered. And in matchups like this, you can even think about starting him in like a 14-team league or something. I would hope your roster's not at the point where you're starting him now. For the Skins, Jaden Daniels. If you were brave, if you waited on quarterback and you took Jaden Daniels, early returns on that are looking good. A little worried that he's going to get used up so much he's going to get hurt. He was running power goal line runs down by 20. I don't know if that's responsible, but you're starting him every week. That's your starter until proven otherwise. Same thing with Brian Robinson Jr. Brian Robinson Jr. got elite RB1 usage. It did not look like this was a split per se. It looked like it was mostly Brian Robinson's backfield. Eckler started to get some kind of cheaper dump offs toward the end of the game. And actually, for that reason, I like Eckler a lot this week. I'm actually going to call him a start this week. I think between the receiving usage, between the odds that he gets on the goal line and runs one in there, Look, man, depending on what his DFS price is, probably going to be very reasonable. You're sitting Ertz. Ertz just didn't get the volume. The tight ends just didn't get the volume. Jaden looks like he is not. It's weird because he had such a good deep ball in college, and I think that was part of the rationale with the guy we'll get to at the end here. But he did not look like he's going to have the passing to support them yet. He threw a lot of the short stuff, went to Luke McCaffrey. I know there are a lot of Luke McCaffrey truthers in the old fantasy community. Maybe that ends up coming to fruition. But for now, I don't know if he's going to be supporting pass catchers, at least not currently with how he's playing. We're going to find out this week, but in that spirit, Scary Terry, one of my favorite players in the whole league. Ted knows in leagues we've played together, I think I drafted Terry for 4 years straight. I was on a streak. I broke it the last couple of years, but I have always had Terry rosters. This is the first year since he was a rookie I have not had one. And I just don't know. I know people were so much higher on him this year. It was not encouraging to me. I know the air yards were good, prayer yards, as Ted would say. It was not encouraging to me. With what I'm seeing from him right now. So he's a tricky decision because the matchup's so good. I think if he does not hit this week, you have to seriously consider the fact that Jaden cannot support passers at this stage in his career.
Yeah, and just to kind of harp on that, I think we saw that with all of the rookies week one. None of them looked ready for the spot. Like, I mean, Jaden, he'll get you there. He'll get you there with the rushing upside, right? And this Giants matchup is about as good as it gets. I'm playing a Jaden Daniels roster this week. I'm terrified he's going to drop 30 on me, just from just running all over these guys. But the overall story of this, I think, is it's hard. It's hard to integrate from the college game into the NFL game. And I think what we saw with CJ Stroud last year, he's a unicorn, right? Like it takes these kids a little bit to get used to it. So for now, what we're going to kind of just be handicapping and recommending things based on these rookie quarterbacks not being ready to sustain pass catchers going forward. Then yeah, that's kind of all I have for this. For all you Ben Sano guys out there, I actually there's one roster I was desperate enough where I had to start Ben Sano last week. Zero burger from him. Sorry guys, it was a cute off-season idea, but you were too deep in the bag there. All right, next we got Jimmy G and the Los Angeles Rams going into Arizona to play the surprising Cardinals. They almost came out of Buffalo week one with a W, which was it was not on my scorecard. I'll say that right now.
They looked fantastic, dude.
Yeah. I think they'll be good this year. I think for sure. I think they might even be contending for a wild card. But we'll see how that shakes out. The Rams are actually underdogs in this game with an implied team total of 24 points, and the Cardinals have an implied team total of 25 and a half points. So Vegas is clearly giving Arizona the respect here. For the Rams, this is a very condensed offense, and without Puka in there, our starts are very clear. It's just Stafford, Cup, and Williams. Stafford will never be the type of guy like Jin Daniels that gives you the rushing upside, but man, if he's throwing the ball 40 times a game in a high passing volume offense, look out. Um, then our tricky decisions, Colby Parkinson and Demarcus Robinson. Colby Parkinson, a lot of people were kind of talking about him in the offseason if you were a tight end zero roster, about maybe being a guy who would get some work. It looked like week one, he was definitely getting looked at a lot by Matt Stafford. And with Puka out, I would expect these targets, the massive volume that Puka would get, to go to other places. I wouldn't be surprised to see Parkinson get a lot of that. I really like him this week in a plus matchup against a defense that I think probably has good direction and scheme, but probably not the talent right now. And then Demarcus Robinson, he was popping up last week too against another team that doesn't have a great defense, an attackable defense at least. I would expect this one to be a barn burner. I think the Rams are just going to be throwing the ball maybe 50 times this game. So yeah, we definitely want pieces of that offense. And for the Cardinals, we're starting Kyler, Marvin Harrison Jr., James Conner, and Trey McBride. And our tricky decisions are the Human Dortch and Michael Wilson. So a couple of things on the Cardinals. I think Kyler's self-explanatory. We don't have to tell you why rushing upside is good for an NFL quarterback, especially one that can also throw the ball like Kyler does. I feel great about him. I feel better about him as a fantasy option than a real life option, but I think he's a good real life option too. Marvin Harrison Jr., don't freak out. don't freak out if you were a fantasy manager who drafted him in the first round. That's probably not your best possible first round pick, but I still am viewing him as a generational talent. There's going to be a lot of stats out there that tell you how bad he was week one. There's going to be a lot of overly analytic stats. Marvin Harrison Jr. only ran 16.1 miles per hour on his fastest point in week one. I don't give a shit. He's a great player. Just give it some time. He'll get there, and I think you'll feel good about him. And I wouldn't even think about sitting him this week in a matchup that we're calling a barn burner here. Then the only other note I really have is the Human Torch. We kind of disrespected this guy last week. We called him a sit. I said, he's only on here because of his name, and he came out and he was the leading receiver for the Arizona Cardinals week one. I think part of that probably did have to do with Harrison kind of having an off game. He will just get the slot usage. To me, the Human Torch is very similar to Wandale, right? Like he's going to get a ton of targets, I think, as long as he's on the field. He's always kind of produced it like a decent level in fantasy, but he does not. They're lower value targets, they're shorter targets, and he's never going to have that explosion game. Like, I think if you're ever thinking about flexing the Human Torch, you have to look at it as like, I need like just somebody to get me a consistent 5 or 6 points, right? If you're doing that, then I think you can flex him. But like, if you need like a high roll type of like frisky pick for your flex spot, I wouldn't roll him out. I think that his ceiling is very, very low, and but on the other side, right, his floor is very high. Do you have anything to add to this one, Yanni, other than Jimmy's stupid, ugly
No,
face?
right. No, I mean, Micah Wilson's just on there because he did catch the touchdown last week and he has shown promise in the past. It's sort of going to be a little bit of a race between him and Dortch to see who takes over that number 2 role. Looks like it's going to be Dortch, but Wilson got the touchdown. We'll see. Whichever one gets the full number 2 work should actually have some value in fantasy. But we'll see. And the Marvin Harrison Jr. thing, dude was not getting a lot of separation. We'll see.
All
We'll see.
right. Yanni is a big analytics guy. He's the big prayer yards guy.
I took no shares of Marvin Harrison.
I got him at 32 in one draft. I was ecstatic over
Oh
that.
yeah,
And
yeah. That's different. That's different, dude. He went 10 to 15 in most drafts I did. He went first round in a couple leagues. Okay, so this week, God, man, what a disappointing debut for the Bengals, and now they get the Chiefs. It's going to be the Bengals at the Chiefs with an implied team total of 21, coming back with the Chiefs at 26.5. So we had a back and forth about would you call Chase a start right now? You had the kind of what we're calling water bottle gate with Joe Burrow. He addressed it today and kind of laughed about it, but his reaction can be whatever it wants. It didn't look right to me. Joe does not look right to me. It's an injury that's actually extremely rare in the NFL. I don't believe any quarterbacks had it before. I know it's been an issue with pitchers before. And my understanding was it is uncharted medical territory as far as whether or not he comes back. And I saw people making fun of that take, but I don't know what's funny about that take, man. To me, it's he has not looked right for now 2 years. Half of his seasons have ended in season-ending injury. I think there's real reason to be concerned. The only Bengal I took any shares of this year was like 3 shares of Chase Brown. That's it. I would not touch them for that reason. Now Vegas, based on implied team totals, based on Chase's totals, based on Burrow's totals, thinks he's healthy and they're going to be fine. Vegas knows a lot better than I do. That's just how I feel about it. So for now, you are probably going to start Chase. I doubt people have rosters where they don't need to start Chase. And it's going to be a game where they're passing a lot. But you're sitting Burrow and you're sitting Chase Brown, especially until they figure out what is going on with the offense, until they get different users. That was never going to be a Chase Brown game last week because they were supposed to be up by a lot. But even weirder, it was like this weird deadlocked game and where it was sort of back and forth. So Moss got more work. Moss got the touchdown. For that reason, he's going to be a tricky decision. I don't know, man. The Chiefs teed off on Derrick Henry. The Chiefs were able to make the Ravens stop using Derrick Henry. If they can make the Ravens stop using Derrick Henry, very good chance they make you stop using Zach Moss. But if you put him in, he's a touchdown-dependent RB3 flex, that range. I would be shocked if he hits RB2 range. And then for the Chiefs, you're starting Mahomes, you're starting Kelsey, you're starting Rice, you're starting Pacheco. You can pretty much pencil that in every single week. Rice looks like the discount Amon-Ra St. Brown. Kelsey, I don't really care how he looked week one. I don't care what controversies there are. You're never going to sit him. If you really feel that way, trade him away and get a haul for him on name brand value. Pacheco looked very good against a very tough defense. You would assume better days are ahead, and this is one of them. He should absolutely smash this week against the Bengals after Ramondre went off for over 20 points last week. Tricky decision. Worthy. Early returns looking good, man. Worthy went anywhere in my highest league I was in. He went in the fifth round and a half PPR, which I think is insane. But Worthy went anywhere usually from like pick 80 to a pick 100, usually in there. You have to feel good about that if you did it right now. I will say, though, only had 3 opportunities, 2 of which were totally blown plays that led to touchdowns. Yeah, maybe a little bit of a sell high. You want to think about it if you're rostering him. And for this week, he's going to be a tricky decision because they should not have to air it out that much. In weeks where they have to air it out a bunch, like they did against the Ravens, throw him in there, man, to feel good about him. And really, he's probably still a reasonable flex. I would just be surprised if Mahomes has to throw it 30 or 40 times this week.
Yeah, this is not the Bengals and Chiefs rivalry, in my opinion, that it used to be. I think this Bengals team is in trouble, dude. Like, this is the second straight year they came out as one of the worst looking teams in the league last year, and now you add Chase Rust to it. Like, if Burrow can't figure it out, if Burrow is not healthy and he never recovers really, like this Bengals team is dead. And as far as like guys who were going in the first round of fantasy drafts are concerned, right? Like Christian McCaffrey is looking at missing his second week now in a row. And like you said, right? Like potentially he's going to get 60 to 70% of his workload going forward if they're trying to preserve him. I would feel better about that pick than Jamar Chase right now. Like if I'm a Jamar Chase owner, I'm panicking, my hair's on fire. I don't know what's going on. It's unfortunate. Hopefully Burrow can figure it out. I mean, this is an injury that's ended pitchers' careers before, though, so we'll see. And then my only note on the Chiefs is this is like a more complete Chiefs team. This is one of the most complete Chiefs teams we've ever seen, in my opinion. So I think that the way this offense is going to shake out is more like last year's Chiefs versus the 2 years ago Chiefs where Mahomes was MVP. I don't think you saw it week one. Mahomes doesn't have to throw the ball 50 times a game. So he might not get there every single week as an insane, fantasy option, but he's still the best doing it right now. So yeah, and I was encouraged by Worthy. I again not a big college football guy, but I know a lot of people were high on him coming out of college. He reminded me of Jahmyr Gibbs when he touched the ball. Like he's liable to go the entire. He's liable to
Yeah,
go the entire field and get a touchdown anytime he touches it. Sucks to see him on the Chiefs. I think the Bills traded the Chiefs that pick to get Xavier Worthy. Like, why?
the
Why did you let
the
them do that? I don't get
well,
it.
what's even more interesting is the Bills also traded them the pick to let him get Mahomes. So
Hey,
the Bills gave them Mahomes and Worthy, or either traded out from in front of them or traded them the pick. I believe they traded up with them
it's
to
like
get
the
Mahomes.
the Bills have been sitting there right on the cusp for 3 years, and they just can't get over the hump that is the Kansas City Chiefs. So what do? They trade them a draft pick so they can get this guy on their team. I like the Bills, but man, what are you guys doing?
Then took
Well,
Keon Cole picks later.
to me, it seems like it's going to be a Chiefs and Niners collision course here, coming up in the Super Bowl again this year. We'll see if it happens, but right now, I think that's where the smart money would be. All right, next we got the 1-0 to my disappointment. Pittsburgh Steelers going into Denver to play the Broncos, and unfortunately, it's looking like a 2-0 start for the Steelers. As much as I hate them, I cannot stand them, but this is the clearest 2-0 of my life. The Steelers have an implied team total of 19.5, and the Broncos have an implied team total of 17 points. So Vegas is giving no respect to either of these offenses. I don't see why they would. Our starts this week are Justin Fields. More on that from Yanni in a minute. Najee Harris, who appears to be until Jalen Warren is fully healthy, he's going to be their featured back on a team that I think wants to run the ball. And for the first time in Free Tendies fantasy history, we're recommending a defense as a start in the Steelers defense. I don't expect managers to actually be making defensive start sit decisions or be looking for that in their content unless you're an absolute sicko. But to me, this Steelers team the defense is their team. They're the only team that's like it. They're an absolute dinosaur for building their team this way in a league that just has gone more and more offensively as the years have gone on. But man, they spanked the Falcons last week. They just destroyed them. And going against a rookie in Bo Nix, I wouldn't be shocked to see a 15, 20-point game from your defense this week. We're sitting Jalen Warren, like I kind of talked about a little bit earlier. He's just not healthy yet. Let's see what it looks like in a couple weeks when he's healthy, what the split is. I think that this is pretty consistent with kind of my take on the Steelers' backfield. That even though I hate Najee Harris as a player, I think he runs like he jumped in the pool with jeans on. I still think that he's going to be the guy that the Steelers use predominantly. And Jalen Warren's more of a scat back, change of pace kind of guy. He might get the third and long type of work, but it looks like it's going to be Najee right now just because Jalen's not completely there yet. Then our tricky decisions are Pickens and Muth. George Pickens, there's been a lot of like Pickens is an elite wide receiver talk. I'm not there personally. I think that he's a flashy wide receiver. I think he has the best catches in the world that where he can't get his feet in bounds. And I think that he's going to be limited by his quarterback play going forward. Plus, on the Broncos, he's going to be matched up with Pat Surtain, who's considered the best in the game right now. I think Surtain is going to be shadowing him. I think it's going to be a tough day for Pickens getting there, but we'll throw him in as a tricky decision because week one was encouraging based on what this passing offense is. And it seems like it's going to be heavily concentrated towards him and Muth going forward. They don't have anyone else. They have a collection of career wide receiver fours and fives. So if anyone's going to eat in the passing game, it will be Pickens, but I would temper my expectations this week. For the Broncos, we're only tricky decisioning both of the running backs in Javonte Williams and Jaleel McLaughlin, and we're sitting everyone else because, like I was just talking about, we are very, very high on the Steelers defense. This is, as much as I hate them, and it's coming from a hater. That's an elite unit, and this Broncos offense, they're being piloted by a rookie quarterback. Even if you have Sean Payton, it's still a tough task. It's still a tough task to ask, and we don't see any of the pass catchers eating. And in terms of the running backs, we actually prefer Jaleel McLaughlin a little bit better this week, even though he's the running back two on the depth chart, just because we see the only way the Broncos are probably going to move the ball on the Steelers team is like dump offs to the running back. The Steelers are tough running up the middle on them. They destroyed, they didn't destroy Bijan last week because he's a great player, but they limited Bijan last week. Javonte Williams, still a great player, but this Broncos offense is one dimensional. I would expect him to be running into stacked boxes all day. And that I don't think Bo Nix will be able to push the ball down the field. So if anyone's going to catch it, it'll be short stuff. And McLaughlin, when he gets the ball in his hands, he is explosive. So that's my read on this game. Do you have anything you want to add to this, Yanni? I know, actually, you know what? Guided question, because I did not want Justin Fields as a start this week. I kind of pounded the table pre-show to get him in a tricky decision, but Yanni is like the number one Justin Fields guy in the world. He demanded he be a start, so let's hear from you, buddy. Like, why is Justin Fields a start this week, and where do you have him ranked rest of season if he continues to be the starter for this Pittsburgh Steelers team?
I mean, I'd have to go through my rankings and specifically like do them, but certainly look, if he stays as their starter, he had 15 rushes his first game as their starting quarterback. And that was against, dude, that defense, that secondary is really, really good that they were playing. Talking about Jesse Bates, Simmons, AJ Terrell in the secondary. Like, dude, that's a legitimate secondary that he went against last week. Okay. Uh, Pickens probably should have gone for 100 yards. It was close, if he didn't have that stupid behind reversal play where he lost like 15 yards. Him and Pickens look like they have really good chemistry. He's rushing 15 yards a game. I believe his career average when he was starting quarterback is like QB 7 or 8. So like, and I don't know, does anyone remember that stretch where for like 10 weeks straight you got him off the waiver wire 2 years ago and he was putting up 35 points a game, like 26 to 35 points a game? I do. Look, if he's rushing 15 times a game in a rush first offense, and by the way, they were calling QB sweeps, QB power, QB sneak. They were doing that. They were running. Arthur Smith was running like the Lamar Jackson package of plays from his rookie year for Fields. They don't care if Fields gets hurt. He's not the future of the franchise. He's just there to win games for him. Uh, in a game where they didn't even score a touchdown, he had 11 or 12 points and 60 yards on the ground against a very tough defense, against a dog shit defense that let Geno Smith run for a 40-yard touchdown. Yeah, you're starting Justin Fields. And I know people just got off of him because he got released by the Bears. Have whatever opinion you want of him as a real quarterback. As far as a rushing fantasy option quarterback, he has been a consistent top 10 quarterback since he came in the league when he gets the start, and I expect him to be that for the rest of this year. I have him rostered in 40% of my teams right now.
Yeah, I mean, begrudgingly, I guess, rushing upside is king, right? Unless you're playing in some weird like rules, right? Maybe six point passing touchdown league or something like that. The rushing upside is like the number one thing you want in a fantasy quarterback. So I can
Yeah.
see it. It just upsets me so greatly that the Steelers team had set themselves up for like the most hilarious failure with Russell Wilson, and then
Yep.
them and their obnoxious fan base falls ass backwards into their only chance of not just being a complete dog shit like top 10
Yep.
drafting next year type of team. I
Yep.
still think I still think the Steelers are not the team they think they are. I think that will come to light as the opponents get better. I think it'll be interesting to see, right? Because Kirk to me looked absolutely done last week. We'll see once they play like a real team where the it's a tough ask if you're a team, right? Like the Steelers, you have to go to your defense every week and say, hey, this offense is never scoring more than 20 points. Like you have to keep the other team under 20 every single game. And if we're scoring, it's probably going to be from one of you guys getting a strip sack like TJ Watt or a pick six. I don't think this team is built for success in the postseason, but a lot of their delusional fans on Twitter seem to think that they're good. So we'll see. I
Well,
think time will tell.
so just a couple more quick points. One, two about Najee Harris. He had 22 opportunities this week, 2 targets, 20 carries, in a team that should be heavily, heavily run first, and now with read option runs added in there. I would send out some offers on Najee this week. I think he's probably pretty underrated by the fantasy community going forward. But two, dude, think about how different their division is just a week in. Do you look at 4 games against the Browns and the Bengals the same way you did a week ago? I 100% do not. Now, maybe by the time that they're playing in 10 weeks, it's a different thing, right? I I don't. I think if they played tomorrow, they would kick the teeth in both those teams. You're going to put Deshaun Watson and the ghost of Joe Burrow out there against that team. It, you know,
It's weird. That whole division is so weird to me. It's like
it's one.
collectively, if you
It's the Ravens.
if Joe Burrow is really cooked, like, or if this injury is hampering him, this is some of like the weirdest, worst quarterback play other than Lamar. Congratulations if you're a Ravens fan, you've won the AFC North. um, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I had projected them as going 0-6 in division. It would not shock me if they took one or two from the Browns, and if Burrow is actually like, if his problem extends into the season, it wouldn't shock me to see the Steelers get one or two from them. God, I
See?
hate them so much. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. I don't know, man.
Okay. Bears at the Texans. 2 of the hottest young quarterbacks in football, or at least hot on paper for one of them. Bears at 19.5 implied team total. Texans at 26-point implied team total. With the Bears, we just got the news this week. It looks like an MCL sprain for Odunze, which is going to be, I think, a pretty big bump to DJ Moore and Keenan Allen. The thing is, they need to actualize that opportunity into production. So if Caleb Williams does not step up his game, if they don't cut it loose a little bit, it seemed like they were really cautious with Caleb the first week. I don't know if that was Caleb being really cautious because he either wasn't making his reads or he wasn't comfortable, or I don't know if it was the coaching staff that kind of perceived that they didn't have to. If Will Levis doesn't throw that game away, though, I mean, I think they lose that pretty easily. So I would assume that was not how they wanted to play. I would assume that was a Caleb Williams thing. But for now, they are starts. Keenan Allen did see 12 targets. DJ Moore was the cute wide receiver 6 last year. They just lost someone who was projected to eat like 15% of the target share. I think DJ Moore's a really good trade target too right now, by the way. But so you're going to start both of them. This is where me and Ted had a little bit of a back and forth about sitting Caleb. I know some fantasy experts are starting him this week. Some guys said you absolutely cannot start him until he's ready. Ted has him in one of the leagues we're in together. Actually, he has him, and he's not starting him, but he has Tua as a backup. If you have someone like Tua, if you have a Jared Goff, if you have a Brock Purdy, yeah, I mean, I'm probably starting those guys over him. Trevor Lawrence at the Cleveland Browns would probably be like where my line is. I'm probably starting Caleb. I would start Baker over him. Certainly this week, I would start Baker over him. So it does depend a little bit on your roster, but if you can, I probably would sit him, especially against a defense that plays really damn hard, and especially in a game where they're going to be trailing a lot, which I know you would think means more passing. It's also going to mean more opportunities to mess up. He's going to have to open it up this week, and we're going to see what that looks like. If it looks good, great. You might feel better about him by the end of the week. Tricky decision is Swift. The Texans actually showed pretty damn good rush defense last week. They held Jonathan Taylor to 10 points, and Jonathan Taylor was running a route on, I think it was 80% of the dropbacks. He ran a route, and 80% of the rushing snaps he took. He had like elite wide receiver or running back one usage we haven't seen since like LT, and he's still got 10 points. It looks like that Texans defense knows what they're doing. But they should fall behind. You should get the dump offs. That's what Swift does. He's a tricky decision. He's probably flexible this week. For the Texans, it feels like to me they're going to fall into a dynamic where 2 out of 3 of them are going to go off every week. It just seems like that's going to be what it is. 2 out of 3 of them this week, 2 out of 3 of them that week, whatever. The Johnson matchup in the secondary and the fact that the Cleveland secondary looks really good has me a little worried for Collins. But the fact is, much to Ted's chagrin, Collins is one of the best receivers in the league. He went off last week. You are starting Nico Collins. You are starting Mixon. You are starting CJ. You're never sitting any of them. You're going to sit Dr. Schultz, man, Jordan Schultz.
Dalton Schultz.
Dalton Schultz. I can never remember his first name.
You always call him Jordan Schultz too, which is very funny.
I don't remember. That's from something. I forget why it's from. But and it's funny. Remember, I loved him last year too. It's weird. I actually like him as a player, but I don't think there's too many mouths to feed. We're putting Dell and Diggs as tricky decisions. Again, much to Ted's chagrin, he does not care for air yards. I take it seriously that Diggs had 9 air yards last week, but Dell had a much more down week production-wise. How that's going to shake out, I'm not sure. Is that going to shake out where all 3 of them boom against an elite secondary? Almost certainly not. I would look for at least 1, maybe 2 of these guys to return you low-end flex value as opposed to, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 1 value this week.
Yeah, I think for the Texans, our positioning, the reason we have the wide receivers dispersed this way this week is this is a good Bears defense. This Bears defense, week 2 last year, we were saying start all of your guys against this Bears defense. They blow. They're terrible. Now, I can't remember that they've just completely turned it around. I think this is one of the better defenses in the league. And because of that, right, like there's just, like to Yanni's point, there's too many mouths to feed here. We have Collins as a start, number one, because of where he was drafted, right? Like he's probably a 2nd or 3rd round pick for you. And at least the indications week 1 weren't that you should sit him. I'm not there yet with Nico Collins being an elite wide receiver. I think that Diggs is kind of being killed by the PFF and overly analytic fantasy football guys that are out there. I think the fact of the matter is Diggs is an alpha dude, and he's not going to be denied in this offense. I think that as the year goes on, though, we'll find out a little bit more. I think that as you get more data that comes in, right, you can take those air yards and those more advanced analytics more seriously. But with 1 game sample size, I think that game flow, specific game flow, is way too much of a disruptor in terms of like being able to take something from that. So we'll see. At least in my opinion right now, I probably have it is Collins and Diggs probably tied. And then I have Tank Dell as I guess by default 3rd option, just because he's going to be the slot guy. But I still like him. I still like him as a flex. And then we're going to keep harping on this. This is the story of week 1. All these rookie quarterbacks were not ready for it. And at least in my opinion, you cannot start them other than Jaden Daniels because of his rushing upside until they develop. It doesn't mean they suck. It doesn't mean they're bad players. It means it means it's going to take them a little bit to get integrated into the NFL, to figure out what they're doing within their offenses, and to be able to sustain pass catchers. So, I mean, I have DJ Moore in a league. I'm starting him. I don't feel great about it. This Texans team, they have a good defense. They're much improved. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have on this one. If you're a Caleb owner, be patient. In theory, he's a generational talent. I don't even know if he is, but in theory, he's a generational talent. But I would give it a couple weeks, right? Like, look at Trevor Lawrence. He's like 3, 4 years in the league. I think he's still a work in progress, right? Like,
Hater,
it,
certified hater.
I just don't. I don't know. I think he's kind of a weird guy, right? And if it got ugly in Chicago, right, like I don't know how quickly the locker room would turn on a fellow like that. That's just all I'll say. I mean, I drafted him, right? I drafted him in a league. In theory, he is supposed to be generational. In theory, this Bears offense is supposed to be much improved. I'm not I don't take that one game they had last week where they didn't look good against an improved Titans defense like they're a bad offense, right? I think it's just going to take them time. And I think it's somewhere in the middle. I don't think it's an elite offense. I don't think Caleb will ever look elite this year, but I think they'll improve just from being a young team, you know.
Dude, I mean, the fact is, I know we like to trash Bryce Young. Dude, you got to give guys like 2 or 3 years. If people had, what if people had really trashed Josh Allen? Josh Allen did not look like Josh Allen for 3 years.
Unless you're this guy. CJ is a fucking unicorn, dude.
Yeah,
That guy.
he's that's a special player, dude. That's a
Yeah,
potentially inspirational player.
yeah. Like I mean, yeah. Like it takes these guys a while, right? Like I would just chill out on it. Like they'll be fine. I think the Bears are a much improved team in general. Yeah. All right, and then the Monday night game, last one of the week, we got the Atlanta Falcons going into Philly to play the Eagles. The Falcons have an implied team total of 20.5 points, and the Eagles have an implied team total of 27 points. For the Falcons, our starts this week are Bijan, London, and Pitts, and our sit is Kirk Cousins. And for the Eagles, I believe this is an exact carbon copy of what we had last week. This Eagles team is going to be very easy to project going forward. Our starts are Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, potential running back one, potential he could have a CMC type season. If you're a Saquon bag holder, I'd feel great about it. AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, and our tricky decision is Dallas Goddard. So I think let's start with the Falcons here. Tough week one showing from them. Kirk Cousins does not look right to me at all. I don't. I'm not as bought in as Yanni is on like the medical history being absolute as to what's going to be the go forward projection for a player. But Kirk Cousins was not able to drive off of his back foot. His right foot was the one that had the Achilles tear. Obviously, as a right-handed quarterback, that's your plant foot. You can go on Twitter if you watch Underdog's Fantasy Channel. You can see it. Kirk Cousins was coming off of his back foot, throwing balls over the middle. He doesn't have the zip. He took 100% of his snaps last week in the pistol or the shotgun, which to me indicates this guy cannot move properly. I think he left the tackle box on 1 or 2 plays last week. He's a total statue back there. And if you drafted Kirk Cousins as like a late QB, right? If you punted on QB this year, you went for Kirk. I might look for someone else, right? Um, we have London as a start this week. There was some back and forth about whether or not he should be a start or tricky decision. Based on where you drafted London, you probably drafted him as your one. We don't see this Eagles defense. They can be had in the air. I don't think they're the Eagles defense from the championship run 2 years ago. I think that losing Jonathan Gannon actually really hurt them, but we're still starting him, but I would temper expectations on London. That would be another one. If you drafted him in the early second round, that's looking like a yikes right now. And Kyle Pitts, glad to see the bounce back from him. I think that if anybody, I think he's going to continue to be involved at least a little bit more than he has been. And for the Eagles, I think I already said what I needed to about Saquon. Like that's the only noteworthy guy I have. Like if you have him, congratulations. I feel really good about it. You got anything to add to this one? Or...
I mean, with Hurts not, what they weren't able to run the tush push right the first week.
Mhm.
I think there's a pretty good argument Saquon's the most valuable fantasy asset right now. There's a very real argument.
It's running behind the
Um,
best line of his career. It's amazing what not playing for the New York Giants does for your career. It's incredible.
it, it's like right up there. I mean, CD's usage was unreal. So I think you have to have CD up there, Tyreek, Bijan, but Saquon's right there. He's right there.
Scale of 1 to 10 on the panic meter. How worried are you about Jalen Hurts as like just a football player? As like obviously his rushing upside and the offense that he's in is such that we're probably never going to not start him unless something crazy happens. But like I remember on Friday last week, you were saying it looks like Jalen has regressed to you. Like, how worried are you if you're an Eagles fan that like his MVP season was a flash in the pan, or almost MVP season? Mahomes won that year.
Um, I mean, it seems weird, right? Because for some reason, it seems like he's become a little less athletic. Like someone put up a highlight reel the other day of all of his like 20 and 30-yard rip-off runs. Do you remember like he had a period there where it wasn't just a tush push? It was like he was gonna, really bully you with his legs too. Um, and it seems like something really changed. I'm not sure what. I was so high on them with this Kellen Moore thing. And that's why I took, I have a ton of fucking AJ Brown, Devonta shares. Like I wanted every bit of the Eagles offense I could. Unfortunately, did not have a chance to get Saquon in any draft, which was I was a little cold on him, but I would have taken him if I could have at the 1-2 turn. He always went before me or you know. Um, but yeah, I mean, how worried am I about Jalen? If he keeps throwing those types of interceptions like he's throwing, and then the tush push doesn't work with the line, and the team becomes basically a glorified version of working around Saquon, I would imagine the Eagles feel like they're not getting their money's worth out of him. I just don't know. Dude, there's a long history of running quarterbacks dropping off, right? Like, I mean, he's kind of the archetype of the guy that's going to have a really high peak and then a really sharp fall.
to
Um,
to me when I
how do you
watch Jalen play, at least for the past 2 years, like he doesn't look as fast to me, right? Like he's always been a big, strong guy. He's going to continue to be a big, strong pain in the ass to tackle, right? But it looks
think?
to me like he's fallen down. Like he'll start getting pursued by like a defender or whatever, right? He's not fighting for that extra yard. He'll just like kind of fall down. He looks a little bit slower to me. I'm not that panicked. I still think the Eagles, in my opinion, are the second best team in the NFC. I'm not as in on the Lions as everyone else. I think this Eagles team is much better than advertised. But yeah, I think that the truth about Jalen Hurts is somewhere in the middle. I don't think he'll ever be as good as that Super Bowl run again, but I don't think he's like bad either. I still think he's good enough to win 11, 12, 13 games. This Eagles team is a wagon. That offense, especially adding Saquon, like they're going to be a problem. I think they're enemy number one for the Niners this year, standing in the way between them and another Super Bowl appearance.
Well, I think that's the biggest point, dude. The biggest thing about Jalen is we're not going to know this year unless Saquon gets hurt. Because I think the way it looked to me was like Jalen struggled as a passer, and then it was the Saquon show. So I think what's going to end up happening is if Jalen doesn't look good, Saquon's getting 23, 24, 25 touches. And we've seen what he can do with that. He can be a team on his own. When you add, Smith and AJ Brown to that it they're going to be just fine. But I think if Jalen regresses, the sign of it will be Saquon keeps getting fed the way he did in week one. So
All right, and that's going to do it for us this week. If you made it through the entire video, thank you. Please like, subscribe, hit the bell if you haven't already. Question for the audience. Who are you most looking forward to watching this week in the NFL? Just like from a viewer perspective, right? Just take fantasy out of it. Who are you the most excited to see? Which matchup are you the most excited to see? And we'll catch you next week, or I guess not next week, tomorrow for the gambling episode.
yep. Thank you.